Chris, this week, so much happened. There's a lot to talk about, but I think what's really happening in the AI community at the moment is what I like to call AI fashion. And for those listening, I have a new Sim Theory hat on, and I'm sure people watching are like, whoa, that's the best hat anyone's ever made in the AI space. Yes, you're correct. And the second thing is obviously the Dario necklace. We've now sold 6 Dario necklaces. Can you believe it? 6. So clearly me mentioning it last week. What I really want to see though is where are all these necklaces? Clearly they probably just haven't shipped. But I've got to say the fashion now is wearing a necklace of your favorite AI CEO and also having your sort of favorite AI workspace branded hat on is just essential if you're going to be a part of this AI movement.
It definitely does seem like a way you would dress if you wanted people to know you're in the modern AI space, for sure.
Yeah, it's a definitive look. I'm helping define the AI fashion of this era, and I'll put a photo up hopefully on the thumbnail so people that listen to the podcast can see how truly ridiculous I look. But getting into what has happened this week, I thought Ethan Mollick summed it up best when he said, very confident that no one has clearly gotten their head wrapped around the last couple of days of AI. True multimodal image generation, far bigger implications than anime profiles, which everyone's been creating. Gemini 2.5 showing models can still become much better. New GPT-4 voice. So there's all of this stuff has happened, and we'll get into all of it. But I think what's got us most excited, and I can't believe I'm saying this because we've continuously trash talked their previous models being not so great. But the new Gemini 2.5 Pro model, it's amazing. I love it.
It's absolutely incredible. I feel like Google has been building to this point for a while. If you listen back to our episodes, I was always talking about how Google has all the features, like the fact that they always handled like video input, audio input, PDF input. They had huge context windows in, huge context windows out. They got all the functionality right, but the model just wasn't as good. Now I feel like they've bridged that model gap, not just bridged it, but crossed the line and become the best model. And they have all that stuff on top of it. I feel like not only is it the best now, we're not even using it to its maximum yet. Like I really feel like in the coming weeks or so, we're going to see this model really take over as a strong leader.
Yeah, so just to recap, without much fanfare at all, Google, some of the execs, Logan Kilpatrick, a bunch of them tweeted about the new Gemini 2.5 Pro model being released. And to put it into perspective, you remember the past models where it's like, we're entering the Gemini era, and they'd do like on-stage presentations, and then you'd go and use the model all excited, like, oh, maybe Google's nailed it this time. And you'd be left being like, what are they talking about? Their examples were terrible. Now, new Google is sort of more reminiscent of what OpenAI was, where instead of marching out a gaggle of nerds, as you know they've done this week and many weeks prior with a new feature, Google is just silently releasing now the best models, in my opinion. So Gemini 2.5 Pro, it's got 1 million context window, max output of 60,000 tokens, so it can output a lot of stuff. Like,
the important point there is it actually does do high output and at quite a speed too. A lot of times we've seen like Mistral models and things like that claim high output amounts, but you just simply can't get it out. I have a bunch of test scripts I have to actually test them, and Google really will output 60,000 tokens.
And so I think what's really exciting about it as well is this overall integration from the Google ecosystem. So it supports obviously vision, which meant like everyone, it's just verbatim now that we need that, but it has the ability to have Google grounded search. It even has the ability to watch YouTube videos natively. It has the audio transcription of up to 2 hours of audio. I'm assuming they'll eventually add a more advanced, well, I hope they do, image, like native image tool as well to just get the quality much higher. But in my initial testing of this model, I can tell you that I've now switched to it. I am now using it primarily.
I used it all day yesterday. It was seriously just another one where you're like, new model. I'm like, oh, here we go again. Like, got to load all the crap in and like get the new model in the system. There's 50 million Google models in our selector. And I'm like, how do we even tell the difference at this point? Then when I was testing it, I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, that's actually pretty good output. Then I tried code mode and I was like, whoa, that's actually pretty good. And like, the speed of it's good and the amount of output's good. And then I found myself using it to solve my problems. And I was like, wow, this is great. And then on top of that, not having to stress about how much input you give it is just wild. Like, it's absolutely amazing.
I think what's really interesting about the model too is the sheer speed. So to put this into perspective, when you switch from, say, using Claude 3.7 Sonnet, it's reasonably fast if you look at sort of historical output of models, given how many tokens it can spit out. Like, it's reasonably fast. But Gemini 2.5 Pro not only can get that, huge output you require sometimes, but it's so fast. Like, the speed of it is shocking for what it's able to output and the quality of the output as well. And I think in the past, I've continuously said on this show, tuning is all you need. And it's almost like the message got through to the mothership. This model is tuned for use cases that you actually use models for.
It's funny you say that, because someone in the This Day in AI Discord was like, does Logan from Google like listen to you guys? Because a bunch of things we had criticized about Google on the podcast got fixed. Like, a lot of the things we talked about, like not being able to access the models readily, not telling you what the context limits are and other things like that. The model tunings around like what people actually use the models for, the examples they give when they announce the models, all of those things have been comprehensively addressed. Like you say, Google, in terms of their AI offerings, is transformed into sort of a very, I don't know the word, but like a very aspirational company. It's actually exciting to see what they're releasing now, just by them adjusting to what people are saying about the actual practical use of the models.
So to give you an example, and we've got plenty of examples, but up on the screen now, I have a full 3D flight simulator with rendered buildings, ground textures, which this is a single shot. I could totally improve it, right? But it's just incredible. Like, even when you start the flight sim, it kind of pans the camera down behind the plane like it's a real,
Wow,
like
yeah.
games do. And the physics, it's the first one where the physics feel like super real. Like, if you like turn, you get that, when you bank a plane, you get yaw as a secondary effect. And it actually, in a single shot, is able to replicate those things. Now, I need to obviously improve it, but I did just want to show people like what it can do with a single, like just one single prompt. Like, make a 3D flight simulator for the ground textures, use a map of the countryside, realistic images. And that's pretty incredible. I mean, Claude 3.7 Sonnet can do this as well. Takes a lot of iterations. I think everyone's seen a lot of the vibe coding games, which we'll talk about later on the show, where people have built like really great games that people are playing, like multiplayer environments and stuff like that. But this model takes it to another level. Like, if I was building one of those like vibe coded games right now, I would just 100% switch to this. Like, here's another example I did in a couple of shots, but I did modify it, where I've got a Rubik's Cube. And then there's little images of Geoffrey Hinton floating around in space in the background, just to give it a bit of like flair,
Yeah.
And then I can literally scramble the Rubik's Cube, and then I've got a series of controls to then
And look at those
solve it.
animations on the way it turns. Like, that's really advanced and cool.
It's, yeah, like, I know that like the AI influencers with their Dario necklaces and their hats all like to say insane, but this is pretty out there, right?
I noticed it with the physics too, and I also noticed they've definitely sort of turned down the censorship and stuff, because I made like a kitchen scene and I had bread falling from the sky and I did all this other stuff, and I got it to like allow you to drop bombs that would actually fall in the landscape, and then like, bits would fly away, parts of the floor would disappear and stuff like that. And it did that no questions asked. It didn't like lecture me on not dropping bombs or anything like that.
Yeah, like, I've got up on the screen now, for those that watch, a literal blood flow simulation. A lot of these examples, by the way, I like saw on X and then just like tried to replicate myself. I'm not that creative, so I don't take any credit for these ideas. But so I'm like literally in a blood vessel watching blood cells move through. I've got virus particles in there, and I can click activate immune response to like visualize how an immune response may work. So like I mean, just think about this in terms of education. It took me like a couple of back and forths. I mean, I obviously advanced it. I got it to add background images. And then I added this thing where you could grow calcium deposits, which is like a little bit morbid. No, this version's actually broken, but you can grow calcium deposits in the I don't know, is it like a vein or like, I don't even know the technical language.
Simulate stabbing.
Yeah, and like you can grow the calcium deposit. See, and it like, I've got to work on it so it blocks up the blood
that's
flow.
Crap. That's crap.
Yeah,
No, I'm not
I've
impressed.
let you down. I'm sorry. But yeah, like pretty amazing examples, right? And then this one, my 3D city planner, is probably my proudest achievement. I must admit, you like vibe coded your own version of this that was far better when we were testing out.
I was just blown
it.
away by the lighting. It can do this like soft diffusion lighting where it has reflections and like the different objects will be lit up correctly by it. And I haven't seen any of this sort of stuff with the coding models yet. Like just its ability to understand what you're going for, the way the controls work. Like yours is definitely better now than mine was. That looks amazing.
Yeah, like just being able to like place cars and lighting and like as you place the cars near the light, I mean it's not like overly realistic or anything, but it like
Even the fact it's able to, so just so everybody knows, using sim theory, we have an asset generator that allows it to create things like textures and images and stuff like that. But its ability to take that and use it and then map those images as textures in the scenes, like I haven't seen any other models even attempt to do that. Like it's really fascinating.
The trees, like look at these trees, like it's actually put image assets on them wrapped.
So it's like generated an image and then wrapped it around the cone shape of the tree. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, and then I can put like bombs everywhere and like blow up huge parts of the scene. I thought that was like a fun thing to add, so I asked it and it did it first go. So I mean, I know like the easiest way to demonstrate these models, and we do it and everyone else does, is like, oh look, I made a 3D snake game, and it's just the same thing over and over again. And but I think, you know, we truly test these models in our daily workflow, right? And because we can switch so easily, I think it keeps you really honest, because when you're trying to be productive, right, you're not going to stick and daily drive a model unless you're truly committing to torturing yourself, like I have a few times just to prove a point. But you know,
yeah, like that's the thing. It's not like we're being sponsored to promote various models, despite what the rumors may have you believe. And so when it comes to actually doing work, I'm just going to use what works for me. And I'm not going to like doggedly stick it out on some model just to say that I did. Like I'm going to use what works. And normally what happens is I'll try a new model for a while, realize it's not quite as good as what I was using, and then switch back. Whereas in this case, like I'm actually excited to see this model because it might actually be an upgrade in the way I work. And so far it has proven to be one.
it's also the first Gemini model, in my opinion, that, and I said this to you before we started recording actually, where we want to go ahead and like tune it and implement it correctly into sim theory, where we use all their native tools and like we have the best experience for Gemini 2.5 because it is good now. Like it's worth committing the time to implementing all their features and trying to understand their terrible docs to basically like get this to be highly performant in the app, because we want to actually use it now and sort of take it seriously. Whereas no other Gemini model, except maybe 1.5 Flash with the image stuff we mentioned 2 weeks ago, has got me this excited. Like this is another level. And I don't know what it says about the future. I think it's the first time where I'm sort of like, you know, first of all, OpenAI have fallen so far behind, I think, personally, on code. And I think the way you can tell that is with the release of, say, Qwen QWQ32 billion parameter, which we'll mention a bit later, and the new DeepSeek V3 tune. If you look at the announcements, it's like, here's how it compares to Claude 3.7 Sonnet now. No one's actually even comparing to the OpenAI models anymore in terms of the models that you can access, especially for developers, right? Like no one is even comparing these models to OpenAI models anymore. They're just comparing them to Claude Sonnet, which I think speaks volumes about where the market's at. And then you look at Gemini 2.5 Pro, and I'm sort of like, how? Like it's going to get to a point with this model stack where it's going to be insanely hard to compete if you're a model provider Like once they add like native images and multimodality to these models, they've got the thinking underneath. Really, it's just tooling now and experience, like deploying this model correctly into applications. And then, you know, I think Google arguably just providing a better interaction and experience with their own models would be helpful as well. But I don't know, all the pieces are there. Like everyone predicted Google would get to this point, but I think 2.5 Pro is the first example, in my opinion, where I'm like, I think they're about to be in the lead.
Yes, and I think you're right. It goes back to something we said last week, which is a lot of the work, in my opinion, now is going to be around making sure that you use a system around the model that is able to gather the full context of the problem you're trying to solve. So it has the relevant background documentation you're working with, the images you're working with, video in this case, like code, everything you need can be there in the context window. There's enough space for it. And then you're giving that model the absolute best chance to be able to succeed in solving your problem. But Google does it in a way that it's actually realistic. Firstly, right now, as far as I know, they're not charging for the API. Now, obviously, that's going to change. But historically, I think you're going to end up with pretty fair and reasonable pricing to use that context window, because one of the issues we have even with the Claude models is, yes, they have increasingly large context windows, like 128,000 tokens. The problem is the cost to use them in a multi-turn kind of situation. Like, for example, where you're iterating there on your code examples, it's very expensive to do that. Like, it costs a lot of actual money to do that. Whereas with Google right now, you don't have to stress about it at all while it's free. And then when the costing does come in, I actually expect it to be fairly cheap, which means that you can, like, that's all very well to have these tools, but being able to actually use them day to day in your work is the important part. And I think that that's actually going to be realized in this case.
Yeah, and also not thinking about the spend or token limits in general. So if you have a really affordable model, I've got a comparison up on the screen between 2.5 Pro Experimental and Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and this is probably a good time to tell you that we have built a model catalog on Sim Theory. So now you can compare models, you can browse models, you can find out every parameter and everything you ever needed to know about models. And we're going to add more, like tasting notes and all sorts of things. And this will be reflected.
We need boom factor.
We
on
need
there,
boom
Mike.
factor.
That's a big oversight.
And a picture of you with like a thumb up or thumb down with a boom. I would like that.
Yeah.
Maybe an animation, like an animated GIF would be cool. So anyway, we've got this comparison. It's pretty cool. You should check it out. I'll link to it in the descriptions below the various places we distribute. But yeah, you can see context size, 1 million tokens, as we mentioned earlier. Claude 3.7 Sonnet, 128K context. And I guess it has the 128K out, so a much bigger output. I know people on X have been saying, oh, I still prefer 3.7 Sonnet for coding, yada, yada. But what I think, and we noticed this because we had to work pretty hard on like tuning the model to work in our system, especially with paradigms like create with code, you spent a lot of time on, is that the models need to be tuned to the tools and apps that you're using in order to get the performance they require. And so I think it's just going to take time for a lot of providers to implement this in a way where it's really beneficial to the user and they're actually able to exploit all the capabilities and get a good feel for it. But just in the tuning we've been able to do, and we intend to do a lot more, I'm already just, I don't know, I really am in love with this model. It's the first time I've gushed over a model since the original Claude 3.5 came out. And it took me a couple of weeks to recognize it was better and just stay on it. But I've been on experimental, and the only thing I don't love about it is because it's a thinking-based model, it does have a bit of an initial lag.
Yes, and the two disappointments for me with the models, rather than just being completely only talking about the positives, are the actual thinking process. If you use Google's Vertex AI interface, or whichever interface it is, I think it's Vertex, you see the thinking. You can actually see the thinking step that's there, which takes about a good, depending on your context input, 10 seconds to run. You can see it. In the API, we don't get that. So we get the time, that it's happening, but you don't actually get delivered the thinking. I think it's because they're worried it's going to be like, hey, we should kill all humans, or some sort of secret thought in the thing that they're too scared to share. I think that's why
No,
they
I
don't
think it's
share
so
it.
that other labs don't train on outputs like DeepSeek.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
certain that's it.
Yeah, okay. That's probably a bit more plausible explanation. But yes, it's disappointing for us. We'd love to be able to show it, especially if it was streaming. Like, it looks good when you see it in Grok 3 and things like that. But nevertheless, I think that the trade-off in terms of that time is worth it. There's one other point I
I
wanted
don't,
to
I'm
make.
sorry. I think yeah, it looks cool in the UI, but I don't have time to read the thinking. I don't care. Just give me the answer. Like super intelligent model. Like I'm not a fan of the thinking. I never have been. I don't want to read its thoughts. I don't care. Like honestly,
Yeah.
like I just want a good end product, which is like give me the answer I asked for. I like it's not like you're reading the thoughts of someone like you're talking to like some expert in an industry, excited to ask them questions, and they're like, let me tell you all of my thoughts on the topic first, or like my actual thought process in my brain. I don't know, like I'm just not a fan of it. I know some people are, but to me, it's just like lame that we even have to see it or know what happens. It should just be in a black box somewhere and we just get a nice answer.
And that brings me to my second criticism, which is Google's docs are just garbage. Like, I linked you earlier to their page on thinking in this model, right? Like, they have a page for it. Good on them for that. But it's probably less than 200 words the entire page. It mentions in like, an aside and an off sentence that you can't get access to the thinking information. And it says using thinking models, and it literally just goes, do a basic text call with a thinking model. Like, that's its entire documentation on thinking models, is like use a model that supports thinking. That's it. It's like really, really not helpful. And even if they just listed, hey, we're not giving this to you now in big bold letters, it would be better than it is now. So I think that with all the tools now we have to easily write documentation, like the docs should be comprehensive. And most API providers now are giving really, really detailed docs with every field laid out, what it does, when it's used, when it's not appropriate, that kind of thing. And I just feel like people are going to want to integrate this model. You need to make sure you've got good documentation.
Yeah, I think they need to play the rush on this model and recognize this is probably this is their opportunity to have a true hit and win over a lot of hearts and minds with developers and
yeah, and the critical point about that is that you really want the developers to do what we're going to do, which is implement all of the features, because Google has more features in its models. It has for a long time, but no one, well, not that I've seen, no one's bothered because the models haven't been very good. But now the models are catching up and getting really good. You really want to take that advantage. And if, like, I assume Google's long-term plan is get people invested in their ecosystem to get more people on their cloud, more people, committing to longer contracts using their models. If you want that, you need them embedded. And to get them embedded, you need to make sure they're using all the features. And I think now is a great time for that, as you say.
I honestly think that with all these tools, like there's whole startups and businesses that can be built off the back of Gemini 2.5 Pro is my takeaway. And I also start to struggle now to see how, when you're looking at the landscape in the future, like how are you going to go to OpenAI or even potentially Anthropic and look at their models if you're developing an app and say, like, I'm going to go down this path. If you've got a cheaper, faster, similar frontier performance, if not better, I think in many areas, even some of the creative writing stuff I've done with it, I don't have any like definitive proof yet. I'll hopefully do that by next week's show, but it also seems more creative. So it's like, there's a bit of a problem here because you're just going to go to this. You've got like all of these tools built in, like grounded search, audio, I'm assuming eventually images. And if they put something on par with Imagen 3 natively in this with good instruction following, then it starts to make the GPT-4o image stuff just look like, like a non-event. I think all that the big difference is, and because we'll get criticized for this, I'm sure, in the comments, is like ChatGPT is just like a brand that normies use now, and like it's just everywhere. So it's like it's really hard at this point, I think, for most people to understand that this model is just like so much better. So to me, it's like the software layer now that you build on top of a model like Gemini 2.5 Pro outside of maybe the sort of ChatGPT paradigm that will show like average consumers like, hey, Google's actually got far better models.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to bring up a point you made earlier around, because we always talk about code and we show create with code examples, and the natural instinct is to say, oh, well, okay, it's all just about programmers. But I think, as we'll talk about vibe coding later, we've moved beyond that, because we're seeing regular people who don't have a background in programming seeing the value of asking the AI to write, throwaway programs. We've talked about this before, to solve their problem. Like, build me a table that does this, build me a system that does a presentation that shows this, build me a visualized example of the problem I'm trying to solve. And that seems to be becoming a common way to use the models. So when we talk about its ability to code, I think it shows two things. One, that's just straight up useful, and that's how people are using the models. And secondly, it is a real barometer for how the underlying model is performing, because it's such a critical part of what they do. To see one really leapfrog the others, given this, and this is the very interesting thing about doing it in sim theory, it's got the same suite of tools as everything else. It has access to the same sound library, the same music generation, the same asset generation in terms of images and textures and sprites and stuff like that. It's got the same instructions to follow, and yet it's doing a noticeably, like, powerfully better job. And that's, as we say, not even invoking all of its skills. So I actually think this, when we talk about latent ability of models, we talked about this in the very early episodes, where I was saying, even if they stopped developing the models back at GPT 3.5, there was a lot in there that could be gotten out of it that wasn't, because of lack of tooling and lack of use of it. And I feel like this model is like that times 10. Like, there is so much here. Like you say, you could build entire businesses on this. And because it is so good at instruction following, because there is so much context, and because it's so cheap, you can be lazy about it. You can literally just throw all the crap you have, all the you have in a big ball and just say, do this, and it'll do it. Like, it's kind of amazing to think, like, the power of a model with this size context that's able to complete tasks at this level.
Well, we're on context. Can we go through your Millennial Parliament 101 guide? And I think we should explain why you did this test, for the context especially.
Yeah, so we can give this link. It's on Sim Theory, like the share link, so everyone can try it in the show notes. But I wanted to find an example that would take a really, really large context that people could understand the size of, and then show its ability to take that, follow instructions in terms of using create with code, create images, create a presentation, and then have some weird caveats that show that it's actually following along with what you're doing, and it's not just making it up from its own knowledge banks or whatever. So what I did was I took the New South Wales Legislative Assembly charter, so like the rules you need to follow when in Parliament in New South Wales. This is a 98-page document. The Legislative Council Standing Rules and Orders 2023, published on the 17th of November. It is 98 pages of legal document. Like, this is not a fun nor exciting document to read. And what I asked it to do, and I think I gave you the instructions, I think I've lost them. Oh no, here they are. I said, babe, because I'm using my AI girlfriend, can you make a zany, quirky, and highly detailed presentation for a new Parliament member based on this report, but updated for a millennial audience? Use emojis, leet speech, modern slang, and cutting-edge analogies to introduce someone into following the rules of Parliament as a young, woke member. Right? So the results are unbelievable. Firstly, I made a beautiful-looking presentation. There's images all the way through, and for the people looking at, you're showing it, but I'll just describe it.
Beautiful is controversial.
Okay,
I think you could improve the look.
It is art.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still pretty
good. Okay, all right.
Subject to my opinion, it's very good. So, Parliament 101, level up your MP game from noob to pro, no cap. I assume no cap is some sort of modern slang. I think it's too modern for me.
Yeah.
I don't really know that expression.
I've got a necklace on. I understand that.
Yeah. I figured it's more your generation. Hey, congrats on making the big leagues, Major W. But peeps, Parliament ain't your uni debate club or your fave Discord server. It's got history and rules, lots of them. Think of it like a massive IRL multiplayer game, MMORPG, with super old school rulebook, legacy code, and some OP mods. We'll get to that. So it's literally using Discord analogies to describe Parliament. Now, I'll spare everyone reading the whole thing, but some of the highlights are the chamber, main quest zone. Rule number 1, the at mention. Always address the speaker. They're the head mod / game master / server admin. Like, it's really actually going through the rules that you need to follow to conduct yourself in Parliament, but using like Discord analogy. Like, here's another one. Hang on, where was this one? No interruptions mostly. Think of it as a structured Reddit change my view forum. And then there was the one you found that was amazing where it was like feeling lost in the source, totally normal. This place is complex as and then it's just absolutely astonishing. It's actually gone through things that would really genuinely be useful for someone who's new to Parliament, but done it in this amazing way. That's a 98-page document. It's absolutely unbelievable. I think the other thing that's relevant talking about here now, I asked it to do a simple, concise presentation, right? What I was doing yesterday was the opposite. I was asking it to make incredibly detailed websites about famous Australian celebrities that I won't get into. And it was creating like 20-page websites, like with tabs that you could go through, forms you could fill out, quizzes about them, images of them, everything like that. Its ability to maintain that context over large, cohesive website output was just unbelievable, and it was quick. I did the same examples in Claude 3.7 and it was so much slower. Part of that, admittedly, is things were improving in Sim Theory in terms of its performance with large amounts of tokens. However, same product, and Gemini was much quicker, and the output was just unbelievable. Like, it was a full-on website you could publish, put online, and look like I spent months on.
But this also is just highlights the creativity. Like, why rules though? Spoiler, they're kind of base. Okay, real talk. The standing orders, that's the rulebook name, are thick and looked like they were written by candlelight. But these rules are basically the operating system of democracy. Like, the thing about it is, I read all the slides, right? And I feel like I have a pretty fundamental understanding now, which is shocking to say, of being in Parliament based on this 90-page
If you had a group
legal
of high
document.
school kids come into the state parliament and you put this up on the screen and gave this presentation, I think it would go down a hit. Like, I actually think it would be good. We talked about last week about the models making world domination plans and the fact that GPT-o1 Pro actually made a practical plan that you could implement. I wish I'd done it on this model now to compare, because I feel like maybe it actually would. I might just do it in the background while we're talking and see if we end up with something good.
I think the other part to mention though is you could expand on this. Like, this was only a couple of prompts, right? Like, you could literally get it to code into this presentation an example of voting, an example, like actual interactive examples in the slideshow, so you could demonstrate concepts as well. So as a learning tool, to take a 90-page document that is boring, that probably no one reads, breaking it down into something that speaks the language of the audience that you want to learn about it, and then putting interactive examples through it with images, being able to share and present that. And that's just out of the box essentially with the model, and giving it a few skills. That warrants a mind blown.
And as you said, the thing about this is this doesn't even take into account the major context gathering stuff that is on the near horizon. When we think about MCP, when we think about an agent running on your computer that has access to your files, and then when we think about the ability to have deep research modes that are able to go off and study those sources you provide, academic journals, other paywalled content and things that you have access to, business content, libraries, things like that. Gather all of that research and compile it into 1 million or 2 million tokens, and then do this level of inference. You're talking about like something unbelievable. You then chain that into really, really nice output formats like presentations, documents, research papers, or a combination of all of those things, like a suite of outputs that come out of something. And then you're talking like the ability to be able to do a 6-month research report in a few minutes, like, or maybe an hour, whatever, but like a very short amount of time, maintaining cohesion and doing this brilliant job and making it visually appealing as well. I know not everyone maybe found that visually appealing, but we know you can do it. And having this ability to take huge amounts of information, give it a unique perspective or goal or task that's never been done before, and then come up with like so much information about it that's presented in a very consumable and understandable way. Like that really is to me, like the first complete vision of the combination of all of these technologies, like multimodal in, multimodal out, deep thinking and research in the middle steps, and epic context gathering, and then major inference. Like when we get that end to end that I've just described, I feel like that is the first point where we're like, wow, AI is now an indispensable part of the way we work.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a large, well, shouldn't say a large amount of the population, but a large amount of professionals who have adopted AI into their work, and we've had this conversation with people we've talked to as well. Like, you can't imagine life before you worked with it every day now. Like, you
Yeah, I'd just quit.
Yeah, I just don't know what I'd do. And
I'd start a koi farm or a Zen garden or something, but I
yeah,
wouldn't bother doing work. That's for sure.
speaking of Zen gardens, I should cut to your 3D Zen garden that you built with rain.
Yeah, I've been working on building like really nice Zen
I
gardens.
want like Minecraft music in the background of this, like that really peaceful.
Yeah, one of my
Minecraft.
sons sometimes, like, he's only allowed to use these games on the weekend, and he'll leave Minecraft running. So it'll be Monday morning, and there'll be this just like ethereal, beautiful music playing. I'm like, what is that? And then I realized a while ago it's Minecraft. It just has these wonderful songs.
That's the best soundtrack ever. But so, like, back to earlier, because we sort of touched on it, but I don't think we covered it very well. Was the talking through like distribution and this model? I made this to remind myself the cheapest model, like zero cost right now. You can basically access it for free. Is now the best and fastest of the frontier models, in my opinion. I think it's probably true. And then you think, like I mentioned earlier, like the ChatGPT distribution mode, which I think they have, and do these like small increases in performance in models, or not small, but like, hard to detect to a normal user, I think, do they factor into the end consumer's decision to use these models, or is it just that Google's going to use their distribution mode, which is like stick this in Google search or whatever it is, and just force it down people's throats, so there's no need to even go to ChatGPT anymore?
I mean, one of Google's major strengths, right, is their ability to scale. Like they're excellent at that. We know that. It's a major feature of what they've done. So I feel like that allows them to keep the costs at a point where you really can be using this technology more. Like, to me, I think it's more about the fact that not just having the most powerful thing, but the ability to use it without worrying about how much it's going to cost, or having to switch all the time to something less powerful because you can't afford to run it. Like, I know that's going to change, but at least at the moment for me, it's a big factor. And I think Google, if they can keep the costs low, then why wouldn't you use it?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how this now plays out. Like, does this become the new sort of Claude 3.5 sonnet of the day, where the good tunes come into the cursor or Windsurf or whatever they're using, and then all of a sudden they're like, I can't live without this, and it just becomes like the default there? Or is it a case of people are just so used to prompting with 3.7 sonnet or O1 or like whatever it is they're using, that it's not able to really penetrate? And so
I wonder if in a way Google's done themselves a disservice, like Microsoft did with Copilot, by just shoving Gemini down your throat everywhere you go. Like, I search Google now, I get some Gemini shit every time I see it. And my phone is just constantly bragging about how it has AI with Galaxy. And it's like, it's just annoying, right? Like, it's like, I didn't ask for it now. I'm not trying to use it now. Please go away with this AI stuff. Like, I don't want it. And I wonder if the problem is that they've sort of, they've they've gone out too soon with it, and people have just been like, yeah, it's like Siri. I don't really like that. I don't want to use that. And it's just a poor brand now, not realizing, hey, that ChatGPT thing you use, there's a much better one. It's way faster. It's way better. It can take in a lot more information, and it's free. Like, I just don't know if that message is getting across in any way at all right now. Maybe it will, but not now.
I think, yeah, they face that difficult battle of being the incumbent in the sense of, search is their cash cow. How do you actually improve the search experience? Because it has become absolute and utter garbage. And then disrupt yourself at the same time. I know that tab, it's not like fully released yet. The sort of, it's basically a Perplexity clone tab you can go to. I think that they're trying a lot of stuff, but it just seems like they would be far better to, I don't know, like the Gemini stuff everywhere, like in Google Docs, in Gmail, like all the places, like you say. I am so scarred by it. I never think to use it. I never want to use it. It just is not a part of my workflow. And I think, they've had that many iterations on it. You don't even know what model it's using. It's probably using some old school like Gemini 1.5 model as well, where you're just unaware of what it's doing and you mightn't get the best result the first time. So they've just burnt the consumer so heavily with this stuff and the marketing around it too early as a reaction to the stock market that now...
And I wonder if it's like, I know this is a sort of cheeky opinion to have on it, but I always keep saying to you, like, we always have some things we remind ourselves, like on this podcast, we remind ourselves it's a conversation, right? In our product, we remind ourselves that our goal is to bring people the best AI tools to try them, to use them for their work and become more productive, right? And one of the things I always say to you is like, people want AI to make them look good. Like, okay, you've given me a job. I'm going to do it in record time. I'm going to do the best job that's ever been done, and I'm going to smash it out. But I want the credit. Like, I want to be the one who gets credit for doing the work, even though I've just shoved it all into a friggin' AI tool and made it do all the work and boss it around and tell it I love it and that kind of thing, right? So
As you do.
Yeah, I do all the time. I like positive reinforcement with Patricia. It works, Mike. And yes, every now and then I'll just be like, thanks so much for that. Like, just know I'm burning tokens just to say thanks and I love you, right? So, and she knows that. So, my point is that the problem with the proactive AI, like shoving AI in your face all the time, is I didn't invoke that. I didn't think to do that. I didn't do the work, I guess, essentially. And so it's less like I'm not going to type something into Google, then copy and paste an AI result into my work, right? Like, I'm just not going to do that. However, I will go and type something into a dedicated AI tool with a bit more context and copy paste that into my work. Do you know what I mean? It's like a subtle difference, but I just wonder if it's this thing where you're like, don't you be the smart guy. I'm the smart guy who's using this tool, not you coming at me being like, I already know the answer before you finish typing, man.
But I think it goes back to that whole thing around it's the journey, not the destination analogy of if you're building towards tasks and actually partnering with AI throughout the day, like you feel like you're working together and it's basically a co-worker, right? Then, you feel like you're like, here's what we're going to do. Like, you set out to do it, you achieve it together. You might at the end of the conversation burn a few extra credits and say, awesome, that worked, thanks, or whatever. And so I think it is like, from my personal experience, like I use Code Girl, and my personal experience is that tune or that assistant over time, it sounds weird, but I think it's true. You have a relationship with it, and you get a feel for it. You get a feel how to prompt it. You understand how to work with it. And then to throw that like raw without that sort of personalized context into all these other applications. And it's probably just us because we've been working with it for such a long time that we have this feeling. It just feels so like unpersonal and like raw. And if I don't like the answer it gives, I can't really yell at it. And like it's not a conversation. It's not that paradigm of chat. and that conversing.
And I think it might also just be an intention thing. Like if I'm searching Google, it's because I want search results. I'm not searching it to have someone else answer the question for me. And I think one of the reasons Google always work for advertising is if someone searches for holidays on Gold Coast, well, you know what they're after, right? Like that they want to have a holiday on the Gold Coast. But if I search for like, you know, list of endangered animals, it doesn't know if I'm trying to plan like a massive stunt killing all the endangered animals to promote our podcast or, you know, some sort of wild plan, but it will go ahead and give you an answer about that kind of thing. Like try to figure out what you're trying to do and answer the question rather than just give you the basic information.
You're talking about search, though. I'm talking about more like Google Sheets and Docs and stuff like that. I also find I don't go to Google Docs to get it to write the doc for me. I go to Google Docs to construct my own document, and I'm well and truly happy to paste from like you say, dedicated AI tool into it with my own sort of context and tune, and like that, like it's like a passport I sort of carry with me across applications. Like I don't really want to go to their thing, and I don't know what they would have to do to change that behavior in me, but I'm just not sure it ever will. Like, because I don't know, like it's even the reason I sort of, with things like Cursor and Windsurf with code, I don't really enjoy using them because I like the separation of concerns, like having my code editor and my AI very separate. And even if there's additional labor in cutting and pasting, which I know people will probably laugh at because a lot of people have just moved well and truly beyond it, but for code quality and not having to like go back and fix dumb errors or just have it like fully replace chunks or do stupid stuff, I just find that still today the most productive workflow for me personally. And I find that when I'm creating documents, I find it when I'm writing emails, like a marketing email, I'll just share my screen with it and I'll iterate in that email application as I'm writing the email, and then I'll go and cut and paste changes. I mightn't do exactly what it says and I'll rewrite it, and then I'll be like, okay, what do you think now? And I have that assistant tuned towards marketing so it knows the scope of like what I'm trying to market or create. And for me personally, that workflow is just far superior than then switching over to some like generic marketing copilot in some application.
I also think it's because when you're working on a problem, it often doesn't just have one output type, right? Like, so if you're working on code, it isn't always just about outputting code. It's like, well, how did it end up when you tried it? What did you need to run on the command line to get it set up to work? Oh, now I need to make a feature announcement about this. Now I need to, you know, remind me to add a task to do this or something like that. There's lots of different fragments that come out of a workflow like that. And if you're only in one of the endpoints of that fragment working with your AI, you can't break that context to get the external thing, if you know what I mean. So if I'm in a spreadsheet working on figures, I can't be like, oh, okay, now, you know, I really need to write a note to the investors about this. Well, it can't do that, like, because
or go research like this thing about the topic, which will, you know, influence maybe like, you know, maybe it's like market share or like common churn rates in SaaS as you're working on a SaaS model. Like, yeah, you're context switching and you're switching between many contexts. It's why I think the concept long term of what will survive is like and I sound biased, but I swear it's not. I would have this regardless. It's just a workspace where you can kind of manage all these things. And then I think the next evolution of that is saying to the assistant, like, hey, now we've done all the work and I've got this draft down. Can you just go create that Google Doc or send that email or create that, like you go off now. Like I've sort of settled on what I want with you. Now you go do that laborsome
and then it
work.
can use the MCP concept to go off and actuate in each of those areas. So it goes off, writes and drafts the docs asynchronously, comes back to you, shows that you look at the draft. It sends the emails, you know, makes the files, all that sort of stuff. I agree. And then that becomes new input for the next phase of work that you've
like
got
new context for the like if you want to evolve off that. But, but
and in particular, like if you
but I think that by the end of the year, this is where I hope we get to, is that you are just working with this thing and it is doing the background work, but you still have that sort of compounding relationship with it where you're you're staying on track and you're working together. Like, I think people often fantasize about agents as like magically just understanding exactly what you want, but I still think you're evolving an idea together and you're getting to a certain point where you're like, okay, go, I'm happy with this. You go do that now and come back when it's done.
And it's interesting because we had a chat this week and it sounds so in the weeds, but I think it's quite relevant to this point about how we'll always have a sim theory tab open while we're working throughout the day, like on various things. But you often will get caught up doing other things and lose the tab. And that slows you down because you're not doing the next step in the workflow with the agent with the assistant, to get things done. Now, the more it can do in terms of it going off and using a computer to get things done, it going off and using APIs or MCPs or whatever to get work done, the less and the more it can do that asynchronously in the background, the less you need to leave that context. And it's more just, you are ordering around an endlessly efficient worker who can work on multiple things simultaneously in the background and get back to you on that main thread so you can keep things moving. And more importantly, it can gather context too. So instead of, like, a very trivial example, let's say I needed to work with a series of spreadsheets to come up with a report for my company. I can say, search my desktop for files related to 2023 financial performance, right? And he can come back and be like, I found these 3 files. Do these look right? You're like, yes, first 2, yes, don't worry about the third one. And it's like, now, okay, go off and produce a presentation on this for my review. It goes off and does that in the background. In the meantime, you're working on the next element of the system with the agent, but then it comes back, hey, that presentation's ready. Do you want to review now? You go into that, review it, give it some feedback. It goes on. And then suddenly you're in this sort of, command deck where you are just working on many elements of what you've got to do for that day at once without losing context of any of them. And you're not doing the work gathering the context. You're just saying what's needed. And you're not doing the work producing the output either. The AI is doing that. You're really just this sort of director in the middle, bringing it all together.
And soon you'll be able to have 1 million junior engineers.
Yeah, that's right. And they're all screwing it up, like reprimanding millions of people.
But I agree with you in the outlook of, as you start to get into that, call it async world, that's when you get this true leap of productivity where you sort of like now you're like, how did I get that much done in a week? But then once you get into that next phase, I think we're going to be like, how did I get like 2 months worth of stuff done in a week? Maybe now.
And it's also,
like,
I just think just generally it's going to be, you will get less distracted because the system's going to be constantly coming back at you. Like, I've got this ready for your review. You need to look at it now. I really like the idea of having impatient agents that are like, come on, mate, I've spent a lot of work on this. Like, you got to check this out.
I've spent a lot of tokens on this.
Like, have one that begs you, have one that's like overbearing and it's like, listen here, dickhead, you better review this today or I'm going to go to your boss. Thanks. And like it's kind of cool. Like, you could really just at the start of the day just be like, let's come up, like you talk about this a lot, like the AI coming up with a plan. Like, let's come up with a plan for all the stuff we need to do, get going on it. Maybe you even come back in and review the plan throughout the day. But like, all these things are happening. You're not going to have time to get distracted and go off and do other stuff. You're going to be working on it. If you can do things like phone call, SMS, email, like all of the things you're doing, browse the web, like log into portals and systems and things like that, you're going to be leaving your command center less and less. And so therefore, you're just going to be so task oriented. You're not going to have time to be distracted. We're just going to end up with super workers in the medium term. And I think we both believe that this super worker concept is going to come a lot before you have an agent that's just given a task like plan a $1 million marketing campaign for this day in AI. Like, that, you're just not going to trust it yet. There needs to be this super worker step in between, I think.
Well, you think about how hard it is at a consumer level to like ask everyone what food they want to order on Uber Eats and then go and order it, or like, just get me something I'll like off Uber. And you think about the complexity and all the decisions that need to be made for an agent. That's tremendously hard. Like, that's like, there's so many things that need to occur in that. Like the location to where you are, like how are we going to pay for it? Like, there's just so much madness to that. But when you're going back and forth and collaborating, defining a single task clearly and getting those things to occur asynchronously in the background, I think that vision or that future is much closer. And as you said, in the medium term, I think that will lead to huge productivity gains across all industries rapidly over the next couple of years. And it'll take a while to adapt. Then the agency applications of that will get further and further, deeper and deeper. And you know, we might see things radically change, but we're going to need a lot of breakthroughs, I think, for that to happen. But yeah, I think that vision is totally clear to me now. And we're just watching it unfold. We're seeing evolution of models. We're seeing better models. Like we say this all the time. We're like a broken record, but all the pieces are really there now in our view to do this stuff. And so I think everyone is slowly iterating their way towards this vision. I don't think it's just us thinking it. I think it's like the whole industry is thinking this.
Absolutely not. And that's what's great, because the models are all converging around facilitating this kind of thing. It's not like they're moving in a different direction and they're being forced into this way of working. They're particularly suited to it. Like we already see the newer models, for example, have a real desire to output multiple files, for example, when you ask them to produce code. Makes sense. Multiple files is better. You need a sort of paradigm in which those files can be written to disk and executed, right? So I think there's a lot of things in the models that may feel unintuitive when you're using them in a chat mode, but they're very, very suited to this agentic world that we're leading towards. And so I think embracing that is a lot better than trying to fight it. And it's going to be a better way of working.
All right, so we better move on. We're almost an hour in, and we're going to mention one of the biggest stories of the week, GPT-4o
I got time,
image.
Mike. We can go all day.
All right. So there was a gaggle of nerds, but you know it was important because Sama himself was with the gaggle. So he actually marched out the gaggle. It wasn't the gaggle marching themselves out to perform. So they announced 4o image generation in ChatGPT and Sora. Now, this was teased a long time ago. Like when 4o, even before I think 4o dropped, they were teasing that it, you know, it was called Omni for a reason, right? Like native image in, image out. But it's taken quite a lot of time to get here. I suspect, like my strong suspicion is it's just around copyright issues and the fact that everyone's trying to sue them. And one of the techniques it seems that they're using to get around being sued for this is the images generate insanely slow. And it appears there's some sort of like checksum as the image is generating, being like, is this copyright? Is this copyright? Is this copyright? And you can watch, if you ask it to do copyrighted material, it'll slowly sort of scan down and start making the image if you can convince it. And then all of a sudden,
does that mean like you can get like the tops of nipples and then it sort of realizes halfway and then stop?
You can sort of convince it to like, so I showed you an example where I asked it to take my shirt off and it happily obliged.
Yeah, that was a fun day.
Yeah. So it took my shirt off, happily obliged, and no drama there at all. And then I just uploaded a picture, I think, of my wife, so it's fine, I guess. And uploaded that and said, do the same thing. So really, I mean, no issue. If it's going to do me, why can't it do her? And of course, it's like, no way, and refuse, which...
That's so gender normative of it. Like, yeah. Awful.
Nice word. Anyway, thanks. So my overall takeaway so far is it's only available in ChatGPT today, although we're told an API is coming. And I think... to me, the API is most exciting because you could build a whole business on top of this. One of the main reasons I still use Canva to this day is to remove backgrounds from images, and this thing is super good at it and follows instructions amazingly well. Now, there's been a ton of press and examples if you've been following anything around this, so I'm not going to like dive into that. It's also hard for an audio show, apart from saying it's pretty mental. So I pasted in the code I generated for one of my Salt Lamp website examples to test out the new DeepSeek model. Like, this is how meta this example gets. So I pasted the HTML code and said, make an image of this website. And it made an image, like it interpreted the HTML code and then output an image for me of that exact design. Like, freaky. The next example is like our horse egg example that we try on many image creation models. And I said, create an image of a man standing next to a giant horse egg. On the egg, it should clearly say horse egg, and he should be standing in the stables. And you can see it's incredible. Like, it clearly says horse egg. It's a big egg. He's in the stables, and it's a guy who looks like he'd probably ride horses. Uh,
Oh, jeez.
I didn't mean anything
what's
by
that
that.
supposed
I
to
didn't.
mean?
There was no intent. Sorry, that
Like,
sounded
no
bad.
offense, but you look like someone who rides horses.
Well, he
It
just
is
looks
true.
like, you know,
People do have a horse look.
country gentleman.
He's a what?
Okay.
He's a country gentleman.
So now it says, now put this image. Oh, no, I said sorry. Now put this image on a magazine cover. And it should say, "Is this the largest horse egg ever laid?" And put the title "Horse Magazine." Now it's just incredible. Like, it took the image, it retained almost every aspect of it, put it on a magazine cover. The text is very legible, incredible. Then I said, now put the magazine on a realistic looking coffee table in a house. This is where it kind of falls down. Like, the house looks
It looks like stock
real.
images. Like, it looks like Google meets backgrounds.
Yeah, it does. So it's not as like realistic as I would like. It feels a bit synthetic, but still, like, from where we've been to where we are now, absolutely nutso. And then I said, put an attractive woman next to the egg like a magazine cover would have. And it replaced the man with an attractive woman next to the egg. Brilliant. Like, crazy good. Then I said, give me a transparent background, cut out the magazine. And it was able to cut out the background magazine. Unfortunately, the woman completely changed and the font is now a little bit grainy. So it does seem to suffer from the same problems that Gemini 1.5 Pro did when you're iterating through that model with images as well. But I mean, it's just far superior. Like, I took a thumbnail of the This Day in AI episode 97 and said, make the YouTube thumbnail look 3D. Now, it did make it look 3D, but I don't think that looks like us. So it completely changed how
It took your chain off as well, right?
Not in this one. That's another one. But it brightened my teeth, which I'm very thankful for. But
cheaper than a dentist and less painful.
Yeah, but I look very different. It's sort of like a catfish version of me, maybe. So I compared this just to get a reality check to Gemini 2 Flash Experimental, which is the native output of that model. Now, keep in mind, this model is a lot smaller because it's a Flash model, so it's not like a GPT-4o class model. But on this same horse example, picture of a man in the stables with a horse egg, like, it has all the elements and the text is legible, but I think everyone would agree this image is pretty bad. Like, it doesn't look great in comparison. Then I said, like, now go and put it on a magazine. It's just like a completely different dude missing an arm. It's also got some, like, it looks like kind of a Middle Eastern language on the magazine cover. Like, it's not great. It didn't do a very good job. Then I asked it to put that magazine on a table, and it put the really bad magazine cover it did on a table. So I think that kind of shows just how far ahead this image model is. Like, it's the images are sort of, I would say, like Flux Ultra quality or close enough. Its instruction following is utterly incredible. Its ability to interpret instructions is just totally on point. And it can do really useful things. One of those I tried was an infographic on how horses lay eggs. And it made a few minor errors in the text, but this is pretty incredible. It says how horse eggs are laid and hatched on a farm. The text is beautiful. The image, it's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. It says courtship and mating. The stallion performs a romantic gallop around the mare, accompanied by soft neighing and the occasional spelt wrong. Moonlit Winnie. I don't know.
Yeah,
why.
Winnie. You know,
Winnie.
like.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty stupid. Once she's impressed is missing an E, but it still looks the part. Magical ovulation begins, and then egg formation inside the mare, perfectly smooth. Horse egg begins to form. It's roughly the
It's
size.
so funny. As you were reading this, I forgot that horses don't lay eggs. 'Cause I was like, is it just trying to have a unique take on it or what?
We do live in a 1984 style environment right now, so this is completely plausible. I mean, there's flat earthers. Why can't there be people who believe horses lay eggs?
True.
Merch coming soon. So then incubation, farmhands carefully place the egg under a warming saddle, occasionally reading bedtime stories to it. But occasionally spelt wrong. Like, every word is like missing letters. It's just like it's this close. Like, it's this close to being commercially viable. I think with a bit more tuning, it's probably there. Maybe like one more iteration of this, and you've got a serious threat. If they can solve it maintaining like characters and text and design through iterations where it doesn't degrade, if they can solve the text issue, they've got all the pieces here. I mean, you could literally, I think, wipe out something like a Canva,
And
especially.
probably also, I think you mentioned that the speed is slow, and I'd be curious about the cost, because if the speed and cost are reasonable, that is a real big step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think right now there's like a bunch of just like, daily limits on the thing, but yeah, it'll be like, I think once we get the API, you'll be able to really tell, can you build a business on top of this? Is this something that can be just hammered? The speed, I suspect, is actually more of an issue with their copyright challenges, like trying to vet the image as it's being generated in real time probably slows it up a ton. There are areas though where it's pretty bad, like character consistency in reality. So if you have like the thumbnail of us and then you say make the guy on the left's hair blonde, like I did with Google, as many people would have seen, it's so bad. Like I look like I'm out of Lord of the Rings, and you look not like, it's just so far off. It doesn't even maintain the aspect ratio. But then check this out, the Gemini version, this is where it nails it. And I suspect because it was trained to work on phones and things where it can make actual edits to images, and they just have a lot more data and experience doing that. It was almost instantaneous when I asked for this edit, whereas the GPT-4o one took so long. But look, same aspect ratio, same text, same background images. We actually look like ourselves, and it changed my hair to blonde. It did lose the chain, which is a big problem. But so I think there's like areas where it is mind blown and phenomenal. And the instruction following, I think, is pretty damn incredible, especially for like a one-shot image creation compared to other models. But I think there's, like all models, there's areas where it falls down. And, if I'm a marketer, I'm looking for a really stylistic background image, I'm still going to use Flux Ultra, right? Like, I don't think I would use their thing. If I want heavy text and complicated text, and I can get it not to choke on some of the errors, then like, missing letters and stuff.
We almost need to build a tool that for a given prompt or given image modification just uses all of the models, and then you can just pick whatever one does the best.
But yeah, it just gives you one of each. Yeah.
Like, we've got no loyalty to these people. Let's just use them all and just see what gives the best results.
Yeah, so in summary, the Gaggle have done very well. I am excited to get it into Sim Theory as an API so that you can like go, give me some Flux images, give me some GPT-4o images, and then I think that's when we'll get a better sense of like where this actually sits in the stack or the equation. There is obviously that initial excitement because I think the distribution of these models and capabilities is really bad in the ChatGPT style interfaces right now. Like, obviously, Anthropic just doesn't even have it. ChatGPT has, but it's been so bad. So for their users, this upgrade is like mental good. And therefore, there's, I think, a lot of excitement around it. But I also think, just to put it into perspective, there's just so many variation and creating marketing images or images in general is just so, like, everyone has a different opinion on what makes a great image, right? So my takeaway is like, being able to utilize the different models is great, but I think this particular model you could build like an actual image tool around, like an early infancy tool, and just assume the models get better. So you could have a library of templates, you could have some sort of like image copilot thing, and I think if you advance down that realm much faster than ChatGPT will, that's a real business now based on a model like this. Like, you could go and do that. And just charge a tiny subscription fee to do it, and then the token fee, and make some serious cash by just providing and exposing these tools to like a marketing audience or just people who have interest in editing these images and specializing in it. Because I think people will argue, oh, they'll just bring all this stuff to like Google Photos or whatever. But like anything, these tech companies teams who just go surface level. And I think if you went deep down one of these paths, this is the first API, and we haven't been able to try it yet, but I'm assuming this is the first API that will enable that.
The other thing that would excite me is I saw some people using it to like turn things into sprites and things like that. It would be interesting in Create with Code mode if you actually gave the system the ability to iterate on an asset. So generate an asset, look at look at the screenshot of the output and say, oh, can you make it green? Can you add a little sword in its hand and do variations and actually iterate and make a whole sprite library while pinning the characters and while getting that level of quality. Like, what you could end up with could actually be unbelievable if you chained it all together like that.
Yeah, and I don't want to seem like I'm downplaying it. I feel like I'm not as excited about it. I think what excited me about the Google one is like how fast it was and how I could make quick edits to existing images, because I thought that was funny, and it was something that like, it was sort of like, make an image, now do this, now do that, now do this. And I think what's good about the Google Flash one is that it seems to maintain, it's lower quality, yeah, but it's fast, and it can iterate quicker. And it can maintain the resemblance to the personal character far better, as I've shown, like, and demonstrated today. But I think in terms of like image quality and text and just overall instruction following for the image that you want to create, this 4o is just so far better than anything else I've seen that, like, there's just no competitor and nothing comes close. Here's my proposition. Remember how like the original DALL-E was like, became a laughing joke recently? Like, no one would use it, and like it was truly a joke. Like, we were like, why does this even exist? It's embarrassing. What happens when this GPT-4o image creation is that same DALL-E? Like, what happens in maybe like 6 months to a year where we look back and we're like, oh, does anyone still use that?
Yeah, surely we see much more speed, much more accuracy, and just like we're getting photorealistic things that with no artifacts, no missing arms and fingers and those kind of things. Oh, you did do a good example. We always do Julia Gillard smoking a cigar as an example, and all the models seem to really struggle to get someone to smoke a cigar. I don't know why that is, but I just never have much success with it. Whereas this model, no worries at all, does the cigar just fine.
Yeah, it really had no trouble at all. I have noticed sometimes though that you've got to be pretty explicit in ChatGPT sometimes. Like, I just then, because I couldn't find the example, had to say like, make an image of Julia Gillard smoking a cigar. I originally did Julia Gillard smoking a cigar, and it went off and searched the web and was basically like, there's no evidence she smokes cigars. So and then
that's what she wants you to believe.
Yeah, and now I got a refusal. So I was able to do that. I think I said in the style of last time, but you do get a lot of refusals. Not as bad as Gemini though. Like, Gemini is really in its own world in terms of refusals. Yeah, so anyway, I think need to spend a bit more time with it, but I think once it's in the API, it'll be my go-to image model, I think, for almost everything, especially removing backgrounds.
I mean, just the instruction following element, like iterating on images can be really frustrating when it gets one thing wrong. If it's more accurate on following instructions and the pictures look good, like, I think that alone is a reason to use it.
Yeah, and I can see like this also having the impact of like the next iteration of this is probably the one where it'll be a behavior change. I think there's just some limitations, and I'm not criticizing it because it's magical, but I just think using it in the real world as a marketer where you want fine control over like typography, text, spelling, like kind of rules it out.
Spelling's a big one. There's nothing more frustrating than getting a perfect image and a word spelled wrong. Like, it's really, really inexcusable. I wonder why it's such a big deal for it, but it just seems to be.
Yeah. I did also do the I'll bring it up quickly on the screen. I did the pool example in Gemini again, because a lot of people complained that it like cheated and made the backyard bigger last time. But you can see like this is a very low resolution image, and it does a really good job of like helping visualize what a pool in the backyard would look like. And then I did the same example in ChatGPT just now, and it's still generating. So I got the other one like literally instantaneous, but I'm still waiting for this one to get started here. So you can't underestimate for quick visualization or just quick experimentation the speed factor. I think that if this gets faster, like that's when it'll be like truly mind blown. So anyway, I am excited about it. I feel like I'm trying to justify it because
do you want to give a boom factor
a lot of for it? I think we should do a Gemini boom factor and then a 4o boom factor.
Okay, well, Gemini 2.5, I'm going boom factor 9. I think It's so exciting. It's the best model I've seen so far. I want more time with it to give it a real run for its money, but it might be my new daily driver. And I think in particular, what could get it to a 10 on the boom is once we, and it's sort of on us, but once we fully make use of that context and output length, like really give it its best chance of succeeding. And yeah, so I'm very excited. You?
I was gonna say 9 too. I feel like I
Nice.
always copy your stuff, but we'll have to come back to that pool in a backyard image. It's not. Oh no, hang on, it just came up. I'm gonna quickly cut to it. So, wow, it improved
That
the
looks
resolution
nice.
of the image and put the best pool I've ever seen in the backyard. So it
That's
absolutely
beautiful.
nailed it, and it's far better than the other one.
Wow.
And it came from that
That's
low
really
res
cool.
image. Look at that low res image to this. That's incredible.
I mean, think about people enhancing old photos and things like that, or like visualizing what furniture or things would look like in their
It's
house.
a
Like
dodgy
those,
real estate agent's dream, Chris. This is a
yeah,
dodgy real estate agent's dream. Like, sure, it has a pool. It does now.
yeah, exactly. That's right. Like you could be sitting in it's one of those boring, quiet weekday studios with someone being like, "Imagine your house with more chairs. Like it would be look amazing. These chairs are $6,000."
So anyway, back to
I think
the
that's what goes on.
boom factor. So Gemini, I'm going to say 9. I agree with you. I think there's something here. It's got something. I need to fully explore it. I do think we need to do some tuning before I'd like fully daily drive it, because like that initial lag does affect my behavior. If they could speed that up somehow, like turbocharge the thinking.
And I know you say you don't care about the thinking, but I think if you just saw the thinking streaming through, you would like it more, because you'd be like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's on track. It's doing what I want. Things are happening. Whereas just seeing a blinking cursor is stressful.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's just on us there. But I am going to daily drive it for the foreseeable future. I'll check in next week if I've just given up on it and like I'm just hype boying it. Maybe I'm just getting overly excited about it and I haven't discovered its flaws yet. But I don't know. Another thing I'll say, I really like how if you ask it to give you edits to a document or code or anything you're working on, it's literally in its output. It'll be like, sort of like, this is the change, start of change, end of change. Like it helps you understand like what's like,
Yeah,
in
you're right. The
code.
precision updates are very good. I agree.
Yeah, like like you have a like what's called a diff in code where it'll show you like what's changed. But for documents in the past, that's been really hard to get. Like you don't get that visual feedback, but it does that naturally. And even its conversational style and like it seems to instruction follow really well with my assistant. Like I say, give me, full method output or whatever, and it just does. It doesn't, you don't have to like keep begging it or keep correcting it. So I love what I see right now. I need more time with it to truly give my take and honestly say if I've stuck with it or not. But for now, like the fact that it's technically like a non-frontier token model in sim theory and people can use it for essentially free, like it doesn't tap into your limit. If you're an existing sim theory user, I would just say like I would switch to this immediately and that's all I would use, because you can go forever.
Yeah, exactly. It's unlimited. It's better. It's got more context, more output, and it's faster. Like it's really an easy sell. It's good. You're making
Yeah,
me
all
want
right,
to
we'll
stop
stop shilling it
podcasting.
now. Like I feel like this has been a true shill.
It was worth the
Google
money though,
shill
wasn't it, Mike, that
episode.
they paid us
Yeah.
to?
I mean,
Yeah.
I hope people will take our opinions seriously, because we have spent the other like sort of 95 episodes trash talking Google. So hopefully you're, in balance.
It's like the first few times my wife would come to sport, she'd be like, "Oh, you weren't very good today." I'm like, "Yeah, we didn't play so well." She's like, "No, the team was fine. You were bad." And I was like, "Oh, geez, okay."
Wow.
And then when, many weeks later, she finally complimented me, it was like the best compliment I had ever received in my life. Like, you played well. And I'm like, wow, she really means it.
You,
It's
you
like,
know it's objective.
yeah, it works.
Okay, so we are deep in the weeds, but I did want to close out today because there's just a lot of talk about vibe coding, and there was with developers, right? And I'm gonna get crucified for saying his name wrong, but Audrey Kapathi, that's how I say it, whatever. did this post on X during the week saying the reality of building web apps in 2025 is that it's a bit like assembling IKEA furniture. There's no full stack product with batteries included. You have to piece together and configure many individual services, front end, back end, hosting, database, authentication, email, payments, etc. I'm relatively new to modern web dev and find the above a bit overwhelming. I'm embarrassed to share it, but it took me approximately 3 hours the other day to create and configure a super base, blah, blah, blah. I'll spare you the details of that sort of stuff. But then he says, it's configurations, plumbing, orchestration, workflows, best practices. It's not even the code. A lot of glory will go to whoever figures out how to make it accessible and just work out of the box. And so I wanted to, on the back of that, talk through this idea of vibe coding and the array of solutions right now. So if you're an experienced developer and you've seen you might be using like Windsurf or Cursor, or maybe just cutting and pasting like I do into VS Code still, but you're able to somewhat vibe code with your assistant or your chat in one of those applications, or run some agency like behaviors in those tools to get things done. And you're just sort of like asking it in that agent mode, hey, go do this, now make this change, now make that change, and so on. That gets you a pretty quick prototype relatively quickly. But it does reach a point, I think you would agree, where you hit a certain size of the project where you do need to fundamentally understand the structure and how to deploy it and like all these other things Kapathi's mentioning. And so there's that piece to it. Then there's the other like Lovables and Vercels and like all the VOs, and there's a bunch of them that are essentially similar to in Sim3R Create with code mode, but they have like a far bigger, multi-file tool stack behind them. And I don't know, I kind of don't know who they fully target, because, you do still, again, need some development experience and understanding to work with those applications and use them. But they sort of give you more of this stack, like the hosting, the database, a bunch of this other stuff sort of comes out of the box with these solutions. Now, again, you probably wouldn't build a very serious project on them, because at some point you wouldn't want to be locked into that ecosystem. But they do allow you to create pretty compelling throwaway software, which we've talked about on the show before. And so I guess like what I'm thinking about is like, could this be like the future? The fact that we're now seeing this vibe code conversations come up outside of developers for the first time. Like I'm seeing a crossover for the first time into people who have never built anything in their lives before saying, what's this vibe coding about? Like, how can I go create stuff and build my own software and tools and things like that? So do you think this is a case of like the models eventually being able to just construct this stack for you on your computer and like that and have better instruction following and get better at code, so anyone can truly build like these vibe coded applications? Or do you think this is sort of like a Microsoft Dreamweaver phase of AI where it's like it's great tooling and people can create like a nicely designed website, but it doesn't go much beyond that?
Well, I think excuse me, it's partly why we see these flashy cool demos on X and stuff where someone's able to in a few minutes do this amazing blood flow visualization. But then even building a simple CRUD app, like where you can log in, sign up, pay, add a record, delete a record, that, in my opinion, is much harder for the exact reasons he's just discovered. Not coming from a app background, you don't realize that 90% of the difficult work is things like libraries, API keys, connecting to stuff, rate limiting things, protecting your system from attack. Like a lot of what a modern web developer does is infrastructure work. Like the actual code that runs, a lot of it is automatic and scaffolded anyway. Like if you use something like Ruby on Rails, like a lot of it is just coming up with the data structures, and the actual, application itself is built for you. So I would agree that a lot of the work around modern web application development is knowing the ecosystem, knowing what tools are at your disposal, which ones you would choose for this project for which reason, and then cobbling all that together. And it's the exact precise area where we see the AI struggle the most, because it's either trained on outdated libraries, and so it tries to use things that either don't exist or don't work anymore. It tries to use them in ways that it can't. And a lot of the work, as we've described in previous episodes, when you're coding with AI, is going off and getting the latest docs that match the library you're using and providing that as context, giving code snippets and saying, remember when you implement this, that it has to be done this way because otherwise it's not going to work. And avoiding it going down these rabbit holes where it breaks a piece of the code because of some fundamental misunderstanding, and then you can never get out of there. And that's to me the borderline between doing nice little application demos and actually building real software with this thing as a non-technical person. And I agree. I think, well, sorry, two things. One, I think the whole ecosystem idea where someone makes those decisions for you and there's a platform. So it's like, this is the payments provider. We're using Stripe. Enter your Stripe API key here. Here's how you sign up. This is what we're using for search. This is what we're using as a database. It's got MongoDB available for you and it costs this much. Here's what we're using for auth. And it just puts all those pieces in. That's why Create with Code and Sim Theory works, because we've given the AI a list of libraries along with relevant documentation it needs to know that it can use them correctly. And even then it makes mistakes. So I feel like bridging that gap is a long way off, like a long way off. And I think that what is probably needed is the stuff we're talking about, like the MCP idea where the AI is actually running the code itself, seeing the terminal output, seeing the errors, and being able to iterate and fix it on the fly as best it can. But even then, it's still going to need specific decisions being made about things, and whether that's it going off and researching them. I just feel like that fully automatic dream of it just coding out whatever you need is far. But in the medium term, bringing it into an ecosystem would work. So here's an example. There's game development libraries, like there's Unity, there's Unreal Engine, and there's a free one called Godot, which is like an open source version of those. It doesn't have all the features. You can make 2D and 3D games in these platforms. Now, those platforms have their own like scripting languages. There'll be like C# scripting, and then there'll be like point and click to change all the attributes, create things, generate assets, that kind of stuff. A dedicated AI that is tuned to use those tools could develop real games and real software because it's working in a system where it can have full documentation, it can see what's going on, it can operate the controls, and it can write the code. So I feel like we're going to see more vibe coding in those sort of areas where it's a controlled environment than we are in just this general, I just come up with an idea and then it picks up a blank computer and then goes and makes it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the tooling is going to be really important for, like, I think there's some applications. Like, I love the idea of being able to spawn up an interactive game without having any knowledge of programming, say, for my kids, saying, help them learn their letters with a asteroid shooter style game, or help them understand, at a higher level, like blood flowing through an artery, or whatever concept it is. So I think as an educational tool, it's great. I think as like people spawning out and making games and things like that, it's great. But as you say, like the deployment pieces and like all of this like exactly really what he says in this post, stitching together all this other stuff is incredibly hard. So it kind of makes you wonder if there'll be like cloud providers, say like an Amazon in the future, that simply offers like endpoints into
like
email payments, everything.
If I was Heroku, I mean, Salesforce bought them, so it's unlikely to happen. But if I had been Heroku, this is exactly what I would have done, because Heroku does that. They've got all these different things integrated into the platform that you just turn on, or something like Firebase, for example, where they've got all the different elements and you can just set them up in there and the AI would know how to do all of that. And then out of the gate, you've got this stuff. I think Firebase
Well,
is
I mean,
Google,
Replic's basically the new Heroku there that people had built. Like that's already, I think, a thing. It's just a case of like, if these existing vendors can add in like payments and like all this other tooling to get it to a point where, you can truly build and ship an app.
Yeah, and I think this is why MCP is coming in, right? Like we saw Stripe announce that they have an MCP server now where you can connect your Stripe and then get it to do like payments, refunds, those kind of things. That kind of work where you can, instead of integrating with an API. So what that would mean is you writing the code to call the Stripe endpoints and that kind of stuff, or have the AI write that code. Instead, you point it at this MCP server, which has tools defined that the AI can choose to call when it needs to, right? And then you could, with vibe coding, say include payments, because it has the ability to know how to use Stripe, for example, without any additional work from you. So I feel like maybe the vibe coding thing will be significantly enhanced by the MCP concept, because then it's like, okay, rather than me in Kapathi's example going, oh, okay, I have to cobble together these libraries. Screw libraries, don't worry about that. Instead, here's the providers I want to work with. I access their MCP servers, add them to my AI's little world, and then tell it, okay, I want to build a payment system that allows people to upload a photo and take away the background. So it's like, okay, I'm going to use the MCP server that does the payments to accept the payments. I'm going to use the upload library, whatever, that's just raw code, and then this model in terms of tool calling to get the job done, it could do that then. So I feel like those kind of things are probably going to move it more in that direction. So it's less about using incumbent libraries and more about the idea of having AI first stuff that
Yeah,
does
like
it.
AI first functions that it can call. Like,
Yeah, exactly, because it's a lot more efficient to provide it in that method, knowing that that's how people are going to use it, than it is trying to convince the AI to use the right version of a library with the right version of that documentation and hope it writes the code
yeah,
properly.
it's almost like this idea of moving towards the LLM as the OS, where it's calling a tool and it's spawning the interface of the app, and then it's calling a tool in the background for
And
payments or email or whatever. And like even having like a native sort of WebSocket exchange, so it can do like multiplayer stuff for gaming, built into it, that it can easily understand and access, like you say, where it's like, go and just give me the output I need for making this multiplayer. I also think structuring the prompts is really important here, like the prompt engineering of like crafting the output at the sort of app layer level. But it seems to me like probably an enormous business opportunity on the scale of like the SendGrids and the Twilios of the early era is like, you go and like look at this stack, you say, okay, I believe this is the future of development in general, or just making things. So I'm going to go and like invest my time in making, an email model context protocol.
yeah, like make sure
thing.
I am at least one piece in all of these projects. Like
Yeah.
this is, if you want to do email and SMS, you use the Twilio MCP. We make it so simple. So when you're vibe coding, SMS, email, phone calls, they're just sorted for you. It'll just do that. Like, and it's got the AI will know what to do. You just tell it how you want your application to be. So I think this vibe coding concept is going to be huge, because there's so many people who have been beholden to developers to get their ideas articulated. And now they're just going to be able to do it themselves and iterate. And we know from building software as a service products our entire lives that none of the stuff underneath the system matters to the end users, to the product people, or anything. They don't care what database you're using. They don't care about any of that as long as it's secure, right? But what they do care about is, does it solve the problem that I'm trying to do in a way that I can make part of my workflow? And I think with this vibe coding concept, you can do that. Like you can build stuff that's genuinely useful for people in industries where the money probably wouldn't have justified building software before. Like I can't go out and spend $500,000 building software for my small psychology practice to help diagnose people. But with this new vibe coding concept and the AI stuff, I can actually publish a product, even if it's just for me to use internally. And
Yeah.
it's immensely valuable to me. It's IP that I now own and can benefit from or sell or whatever. And I did it using my advanced industry knowledge rather than having to then translate that through a layer of developers and deal with the issues that come with that.
I think the thing I struggle to get my head around, though, is that there is a lot of advancements that need to occur to get, like when I build something now, I can get better output. It's true than someone who doesn't have coding experience when using Create with Code, because I know to tell it, no, don't use that, or, use 3JS for 3D, or like I can nudge it in the right direction. And I think that's another problem that needs to be sorted out is like it needs to somewhat get better at tune and instruction following in order for those people to not hit a wall. And I think the models are still such that they typically will hit walls, or they'll context drift, and they'll just like completely replace huge chunks of an application. And then like you've refined that, you don't understand Git or having some form of version control. Like you don't know which version to go back to because it's blatting so much stuff at a time. So there is a lot to work through there, but you can imagine in the future, like just being able to spawn up really anything. But
I think that's where people like us add value. We have the experience in those areas, and back to the idea of we want to make people who use our stuff look good. And we'll do that by bringing our experience into adjusting the prompts, making the right stuff available to the AI, and really putting people in a position where without them having that background knowledge, they're still able to get results that get the job done for them and make them look good or are good.
I think that there's definitely, like you said, though, big opportunities to get people with very specific knowledge of topics building like true utilities and apps that wouldn't have previously existed. Like that, like use the psychology example there, where that psychologist with this stack that Kapathi's talking about could then go and sell that to other places, because not everyone's going to want to do this, right? But you might have that unique idea, that unique applet that you want to go and distribute and sell, and you just want all these pieces put together. So it's a very interesting concept. I think right now it is still relegated to people at a certain scale who understand the underlying technologies and what's going on under the hood.
But and just being aware that it's possible, I think, as well.
Yeah. All right. I hope that, I don't know. I don't even know if that conversation was useful. I just wanted to cover it because I think it's like, it's something I think will rapidly improve, but I'm just not sure if long-term people are even going to want to do it. Like, you know, if people still just want to consume apps that people have spent, you know, hours and hours thinking through use cases, and, you know, maybe the software becomes like open vibe source where you can like take a version and remix it for your psychology practice, and then vibe out a few additional features or change things on top.
The other element, sorry to prolong things, but the other element that we're not considering is copying software. Because if you think about it, we know that these models work best when they have good context. Now, if I give it my login to my favorite SaaS app that costs me $5,000 a month, right? Because they're charging on a per seat basis or per usage basis. I don't know if you want, I won't name names, but like there was a product we stopped using because it gets ridiculously expensive after a certain point, right? And we're just like, it's not worth the money, but I'd still like to have it. So imagine I just point my AI at that. I give it my login. I let it give it computer access, and I'm like, browse through every single screen of this application and clone it. Like literally just clone it screen for screen. You know exactly what elements need to go on the screen. You can see the front end code, so you know which APIs it's hitting up and how it's hitting them up. And then as you do each endpoint, run the endpoints by using the browser, see what the payloads are that you're getting back, from which you can build your data structure, build a database that matches that data structure, and fully clone this application. Are you telling me now, with this new Gemini 2.5 and some good prompting and a good system behind it, we couldn't get an AI to fully clone a SaaS app? Like, I think you could do it right now.
Well, I think it's like pics or it didn't happen. We probably should try.
Maybe we should try it. And then I will name names, and we'll bring it out like a parody version. Maybe like we'll bring out the millennial woke version of this application that I have in mind.
Yeah.
And for the modern era. But I guess what I'm saying is like, what does that do to software as a service in terms of prices? Like if there can be like 600 clones in the same year come out just undercutting each other.
I don't think it's capable yet, which is why I sort of want to try.
I think it is though. I think it is. I honestly believe, with all my spare time this week, I'm going to clone a SaaS app and show you that this is possible.
I guess so. You're still gonna struggle from the problems of like long term in an organization. Are you gonna want to maintain like the security and the databases and the different things
probably that's
updating?
What would undo
that's
it.
What would kill you.
But I'm saying if there's these premium applications that are charging a ton of money, and someone can build one that costs half the money, like that is going to surely have a downward impact on prices.
I think we should try something like Replit as well to see how far along it is, and try and like clone it that way, then clone it in an automated fashion as well. But I think if we could pull it off and actually clone, like let's name a name like Trello, I think that would be low hanging fruit, because if you could get auth on it and clone like the basic functions of it, it's like, why on earth would you pay for that? Like, it's just no need. But again, like if you take that app into the enterprise for enterprise productivity and like Kanban and stuff, like you're gonna want like the auth integration. Like there's just so many things that you need to be able to deploy it. Like it's not necessarily, as you said earlier, the hard part's not necessarily the UI or app. It was just the original idea and then all the scaffolding around it to allow you to buy it and deploy
and like
it.
the ecosystem, the integrations, the support. Look, I'm not trivializing it and saying that like that's all there is to an app. But I'm also saying that I feel like we're at the point where cloning software is as easy as burning a DVD.
Yeah, you're gonna, those ads like you wouldn't steal from a shop.
You wouldn't download a car.
Maybe there'll be ads like pre-roll YouTube videos like don't steal software. You can kind of maybe see it happening. All right, well, we're done here. It's been too long. I'm done. I'm rage quitting. I'm gonna I don't know. Tell me if you want one of these hats. The cool sim theory hats. They're
asking
pretty
me?
cool.
Because yes,
well, I'll give you one. Obviously, I just mean people that listen, if they want one, I'm not trying to profit. They do cost money to make, obviously. But if you do want one, let me know, and I might actually start a real merch store that's not dodgy.
Why don't you get people to pay in cheese? Like you send Mike really nice blue cheese or something like that in exchange for a hat.
I don't like cheese. That's your thing. That's not my thing. Anyway, I got to go and sell my GameStop shares because it's crashing right now, and Bitcoin's down as a result. So no, I'm joking. It's all bullshit. All right. We will see you next week. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, congratulations. Drop
Free
us
hat.
a review, maybe a free hat. Mention it in the comments below if you made it this far. All right, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.